With calloused hands and the last of her savings, Jessica Morgan signed the paperwork for a property no one else wanted. A dilapidated farmhouse on the outskirts of Pine Hollow, Montana, that the county had condemned years ago. Priced at a mere $800, it represented her last chance at homeownership and a fresh start for her and her 8-year-old son, Tyler. The local realtor had warned her about the extensive repairs needed, but failed to mention what lay hidden beneath. The rotting floorboards of the master bedroom, a weatherproof metal case containing classified military documents that would soon bring stern-faced Pentagon officials to her door, and place her small family at the center of a decades-old government secret that powerful people were willing to kill to protect. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The early summer rain pelted the cracked windshield of Jessica's overloaded Subaru as she navigated the muddy driveway leading to what was now officially her property. Tall grass and wild shrubs had reclaimed what might once have been a manicured lawn, and the wooden fence marking the boundary had collapsed. In several places, its weathered posts jutting from the ground like broken teeth. Tyler pressed his face against the passenger window, his expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Is that really our house, Mom?" he asked, eyes wide as the 2-story farmhouse emerged from the curtain of rain. Jessica forced a smile, trying to see the potential rather than the peeling paint, sagging porch, and what appeared to be a partially collapsed roof over what might have been a sunroom. "It will be, buddy. It needs some love, but we'll make it ours." This forgotten corner of Montana wasn't part of Jessica's life plan. 6 months ago, she had a stable graphic design job in Portland, a comfortable apartment, and a co-parenting arrangement with Tyler's father. Then the tech startup she worked for folded overnight, the apartment's rent increased beyond her means, and her ex-husband announced he was moving to Singapore for a 3-year contract, effectively removing himself from their son's life except for occasional video calls. The cascade of setbacks had forced her to look further afield for affordable housing, somewhere she could work remotely as a freelancer while rebuilding their lives. When the listing for the Willow Creek farm property appeared in her desperate late-night searches, the rock-bottom price seemed like divine intervention, despite the as-is condemned status clearly stated in the description. The call to Linda Pearson, the local realtor, had been tentative at first. "There must be some mistake with the price," Jessica had said. "No mistake," Linda replied with the directness of a woman who didn't believe in sugar-coating bad news. "The county seized it for back taxes after the owner died. Colonel Garrison had no immediate family willing to claim it. The place hasn't been properly maintained since the 1990s. Counties eager to get it off their books, even at a loss. They demolish it, but there's some historical society nonsense about the property's age. Easiest to sell it to someone willing to take on the headache." Now, as Jessica parked beside the sagging barn and turned off the engine, she wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. The farmhouse looked even worse up close, a hulking shadow against the stormy sky, windows like hollow eyes staring back at her. The real estate photos, clearly taken on a sunny day and from flattering angles, had softened the property's decay. "It's kinda spooky," Tyler whispered, clutching his backpack to his chest. Jessica squeezed his shoulder. "Just old, honey. Remember how we talked about this being an adventure? Like camping, but inside." "With ghosts," Tyler added solemnly. "No ghosts," Jessica promised, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. "Just history. This place was built in the 1940s. That's part of what makes it special." They made a mad dash through the rain, up the creaking steps of the front porch. The ancient key Linda had provided turned reluctantly in the lock. The door swung inward with a groan that seemed to echo Jessica's own doubts. The musty scent of abandonment. enveloped them immediately, dust, mildew, and something vaguely chemical she couldn't identify. Jessica fumbled for a light switch, expecting nothing. To her surprise, a bare bulb in the entryway flickered to life, casting harsh shadows across the foyer. "The electricity works," she murmured, genuinely shocked. Linda had mentioned something about the Colonel maintaining certain utilities through automatic payments from a trust, even after his death. The county had left them connected during the sale process, but Jessica had assumed they'd be shut off by now. What she hadn't expected, however, was the curious contrast between the exterior's decay and the interior's organization. While dust coated everything and water damage stained several ceilings, the house wasn't the empty shell of a forgotten life she'd anticipated. Furniture remained in place, covered with sheets. Bookshelves lined the walls, still filled with volumes. Framed, photographs and military commendations hung askew, but intact. Most surprising was the study visible through an open doorway, not abandoned at all, but a space that appeared to have been used until relatively recently. A heavy oak desk dominated the room, its surface covered with papers held in place by various military paperweights. Filing cabinets stood against one wall, their drawers partially open, as if someone had been searching through them. "Mom, I think someone still lives here," Tyler whispered, edging closer to her side. "No, honey. The owner died almost a year ago. The house has been empty since then." But even as she said it, Jessica felt a flicker of unease. The study didn't. Looked like it had been abandoned for a year. It looked like someone had been working there last week. "Can I explore?" Tyler asked, his initial fear giving way to 8-year-old curiosity. "Stay where I can hear you," Jessica cautioned, "and don't touch anything yet. We need to check for just structural issues first." She didn't want to say unsafe floors or falling ceilings and frighten him again, but the house's condition demanded caution. As Tyler ventured carefully into what appeared to be a living room, Jessica found herself drawn to the study. Something about its organized chaos called to her, perhaps the designer in her, responding to evidence of purpose among the disorder. Most papers on the desk appeared to be research notes, military histories, and photocopied pages from technical manuals, all covered in precise handwritten annotations. But as she carefully moved a stack of papers, Jessica found a leather portfolio tucked beneath a military medal being used as a paperweight. The medal, which she recognized as a Distinguished Service Cross, caught her attention first. She'd learned enough from Tyler's military obsession phase to know this was the second highest military decoration for extreme gallantry in combat. The portfolio beneath it was expensive leather, well maintained despite the house's general condition. Opening it, Jessica found handwriting matching the annotations on the desk papers, precise, all capitals block letters that spoke of military training. The journal contained daily entries spanning decades, though with significant gaps. Jessica flipped through it, scanning entries at random, finding mostly mundane observations about property maintenance, weather patterns, and occasional comments about local politics. Then an entry from 5 years ago caught her eye. HS. Made. Contact again. Claims department will make it right if I surrender everything. Typical Pentagon double talk. Surveillance increasing, unfamiliar vehicles on county road. Phone line with echo indicating monitoring. They don't understand what I've already documented and secured. Some truths can't remain buried forever, no matter how many careers and reputations are built upon their concealment. Jessica frowned, reading the passage again. Department, surveillance, Pentagon. The entry painted a picture not of an eccentric recluse, but of someone who believed himself to be under observation and possibly threat. The realtor's dismissal of Colonel Garrison as paranoid suddenly seemed more significant. "Mom!" Tyler's excited voice broke her concentration. "There's a whole room of cool army stuff." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jessica carefully returned the journal to its place and followed her son's voice to what must have been a den or second study. Unlike the working office, this room had been arranged almost like a museum. Glass display cases containing military memorabilia, framed maps on the walls, and a collection of model airplanes suspended from the ceiling. All featured the same insignia, a shield with a lightning bolt and the words 6th Communications Battalion. Look at all this. Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement. Real army things. Can I touch them? Not yet, honey. They're dusty and might be fragile. Jessica examined the displays with growing curiosity. Colonel Robert Garrison appeared to have served a long military career with artifacts spanning from what looked like the Vietnam era through to more recent conflicts. One display case was more prominent than the others, centered on the main wall with better lighting. Inside was a black and white photograph of a group of military men standing before what appeared to be a communications array. The caption identified them as Operation Silverthread Team, 1968. Colonel Garrison was easily identifiable, younger but with the same rigid posture and stern expression that characterized his later photos on the walls. As Jessica leaned closer to examine the photograph, her elbow bumped against the corner of the display case. She grabbed at it to prevent it from falling and noticed something odd. The case moved more easily than it should have, as if it wasn't fully secured to the wall. Curious, she applied gentle pressure to one side, and the entire case swung outward like a door, revealing a small wall safe behind it. "Whoa!" Tyler exclaimed. "A secret safe, like in spy movies." Jessica stared at the combination lock, momentarily stunned by the discovery. "It's probably empty," she said, trying to dampen both Tyler's excitement and her own sudden curiosity. "And even if it's not, we don't have the combination." "Try his birthday," Tyler suggested immediately. "That's what people use in movies." "We don't know his birthday, sweetie." "It's right there." Tyler pointed to a framed certificate on the wall that included Colonel Garrison's date of birth, March 14, 1942. With a shrug, Jessica tried the combination 03-14-42. The safe remained locked. "Maybe backwards?" Tyler suggested. 42-14-03 similarly failed. Jessica was about to give up when she noticed a small engraving on the safe's dial. The words "Silver Thread Begins" in tiny letters. She glanced back at the photograph, specifically at the date on the caption. "Worth a try," she muttered, and entered 07-16-68, the date listed for the Operation Silverthread team photo. The safe's mechanism clicked and the door swung open. "You did it!" Tyler bounced with excitement. Inside the safe was a single item, a weatherproof metal case approximately the size of a large laptop computer. Military markings were stenciled on its surface, along with multiple warnings about classified contents and penalties for unauthorized access. "Mom, is that real secret army stuff?" Tyler whispered, eyes wide. Jessica hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Opening someone else's safe was questionable enough, but accessing what appeared to be classified military materials seemed like a boundary she shouldn't cross. On the other hand, she legally owned the house and everything in it. "We should probably leave it alone," she said finally. "But Mom..." "Tyler, if these are real military documents, there could be rules about who's allowed to see them." Her son's disappointed face was almost enough to change her mind, but a sudden noise outside interrupted them, the distinctive sound of tires on gravel. Moving to the window, Jessica saw headlights cutting through the persistent rain. A black SUV with government plates was pulling up beside her Subaru. Jessica's first thought was that the county inspector had come to evaluate the property's condition, despite the late hour. But as two figures emerged from the vehicle, a woman and man in what appeared to be military dress uniforms partially covered by raincoats, she remembered the journal entries about surveillance and threats. "They don't understand what I've already documented and secured." The metal case in the safe suddenly felt much more significant. What had Colonel Garrison hidden that would warrant military officials appearing within hours of her arrival after? The property had sat undisturbed for months. "Tyler," she said quietly, "I need you to go upstairs and find a good hiding spot, like we're playing hide and seek, but you need to be super quiet until I come find you." The serious tone of her voice must have communicated the urgency. Tyler nodded solemnly, his earlier excitement transformed into nervous energy. "Is something bad happening?" "No, honey. I just need to talk to some people about the house, and it might be boring grown-up stuff." She tried to smile reassuringly. "Take your backpack with your tablet. You can play games silently if you want." As Tyler disappeared up the stairs, Jessica quickly returned the metal case to the safe, closed it, and swung the display case back into position. She barely had time to ensure it was properly aligned before a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the house. Through the peephole, she could now see them clearly. The woman, middle-aged, with steel-grey hair pulled into a severe bun beneath her military cap. The man, younger, with the rigid posture of career military. Both wore expressions of practiced neutrality that sent a chill down Jessica's spine. "Miss Morgan," called the woman, her voice carrying easily through the old door. "I'm Major Diane Fletcher with the Pentagon's Document Recovery Division. We'd like to speak with you about the previous owner's belongings." Document Recovery Division. Jessica had never heard of such a unit. Her instincts, honed by years of single motherhood and the recent cascade of hardships, warned her to proceed with caution. "It's rather late," Jessica called through the door, not opening it. "I've just arrived today. Perhaps we could schedule something for tomorrow." A pause. Then the male officer spoke, his tone less practiced, with an undercurrent of impatience. "Ms. Morgan, we have reason to believe this property contains misappropriated government materials of significant security importance. We're simply here to recover federal property. This doesn't need to be complicated." Jessica's mind raced, connecting the journal entries, the hidden safe, and now military officers appearing within hours of her arrival. Whatever Colonel Garrison had secured in that metal case, it was significant enough to attract immediate attention from people with authority and resources. "I've only just taken possession and haven't had time to go through anything," she replied, stalling. "If you could provide some documentation about what specifically you're looking for, I'd be happy to assist officially tomorrow." The female officer's voice hardened slightly. "Ms. Morgan, your cooperation now would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, we're prepared to execute a security-based entry order, which would be disruptive and potentially traumatic for your son. We're aware he's with you." The mention of Tyler sent a surge of protective anger through Jessica. A security-based entry order produced so quickly suggested either remarkable efficiency or, more concerningly, that they had been monitoring the property, waiting for someone to access it. More troubling was their knowledge that Tyler was present when they'd arrived after dark in the rain and couldn't possibly have seen him from outside. Jessica needed time to understand what was happening and to ensure Tyler's safety. She thought, quickly, drawing on years of negotiating with difficult clients and unreasonable landlords. "I understand completely," she said, injecting calm professionalism into her voice. "However, as a single mother, I need to verify the identity of anyone I allow into my home, especially in this remote location. I'll need to see your credentials. Of course, please slide them under the door, and I'll contact your commanding office to confirm while you wait." The prolonged silence from the other side of the door told Jessica she had struck a nerve. Real military officers would have identification and would understand standard verification protocols, especially when approaching a civilian with a child. "That won't be necessary," the woman finally responded, her tone shifting to something less official. "We'll return in the morning with full documentation. Please don't remove anything from the premises in the meantime." Jessica listened as their footsteps retreated down the porch steps. Through the window, she watched the black SUV back down the driveway and disappear into the rain, its taillights eventually vanishing around a bend in the access road. She leaned against the door, heart pounding. What had seemed like a desperate housing solution hours ago had transformed into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. Her instincts told her that if these people, whoever they truly were, wanted something from this house, it must be significant and possibly valuable. More pressing was the realization that they would almost certainly return, possibly with less pretense at courtesy. Jessica had until morning at best to figure out what Colonel Garrison had hidden in that metal case, and more importantly, to decide how to protect Tyler from whatever fallout might come. "Mom?" Tyler's small voice came from the top of the stairs. "Are the army people gone?" "Yes, honey. You can come down now." Jessica forced a reassuring smile. "How about we set up our sleeping bags in the living room and have a camping night? For our first day here?" As Tyler descended the stairs, Jessica's mind was already formulating a plan. She needed more information before those officers, or whoever they really were, returned. The condemned farmhouse she'd purchased for $800 had suddenly become the most valuable and most dangerous property she'd ever encountered, not for its acreage or structure, but for what lay hidden within its walls. Documents that military officials were willing to intimidate a single mother to recover. Jessica waited until Tyler had fallen asleep on the living room floor, his small form illuminated by the dim glow of a battery-powered lantern they'd unpacked from their emergency kit. He'd drifted off surprisingly quickly despite the strange surroundings, exhausted from the long drive and the excitement of the day. When she was certain he was deeply asleep, Jessica slipped back into the Colonel's study. The rain continued to drum against the windows, providing a steady backdrop of white noise that would mask her movements. She retrieved her phone and activated its flashlight, preferring it to turning on more lights that might be visible from outside if someone was watching the property. Jessica returned to the den with its military displays and carefully swung the concealed door open again. She entered the combination and removed the weatherproof case from the safe. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed it on a nearby table. The military warnings stenciled across its surface gave her pause. Was she committing a crime by opening this? If the visitors had been legitimate military personnel, she could be setting herself up for serious legal trouble. But if they were legitimate, why had they retreated so quickly when she asked for verification? Why had they known Tyler was in the house? And most importantly, why did they care so much about these particular documents when the house contained dozens of military artifacts and papers? Decision made, Jessica released the case's heavy-duty latches and lifted the lid. Inside, secured. In foam cutouts, she found 3 items: a thick manila envelope stamped with "Top Secret" in faded red ink, a small leather-bound notebook, and what appeared to be a military cipher device, a mechanical contraption with dials and keys that looked like it belonged in a World War II spy movie. Jessica started with the notebook, which seemed least intimidating. The handwriting inside matched the journal she'd found earlier, Colonel Garrison's precise block lettering. The entries were dated, beginning in July 1968 and continuing sporadically, until just months before his death. Unlike the house journal, which contained mundane daily observations, this notebook focused exclusively on something called Operation Silver Thread. The opening entry set the tone. July 16, 1968, Operation Silver Thread initiated today. Communications monitoring station established at Site Delta. Command insists, this is routine contingency planning. Nothing about this feels routine. The protocols we're establishing extend well beyond standard. Military communications, infrastructure. General Hayes personally selected each team member. Why place a forward communications node on domestic soil unless you're planning for something on domestic soil? Jessica flipped forward several pages, scanning entries that detailed the establishment of multiple communication stations across the northwestern United States. The colonel's entries grew increasingly concerned as the operation progressed. August 3, 1968, new equipment arrived today, unlike anything I've seen before. When I questioned its purpose, I was reminded that my role is to implement, not inquire. The detection capability extends well beyond military bands. This system could monitor civilian communications on a scale I find disturbing. September 18, 1968. Confirmed today what I've suspected. Silver Thread isn't a defensive communications network. It's a domestic surveillance system disguised as military infrastructure. The implications are staggering. Under the guise of IA, protecting against Soviet aggression, they've built a system to monitor U.S. citizens. I've voiced my concerns to Captain Reynolds. He advised discretion and reminded me of my oath. Jessica's pulse quickened as she continued reading. The entries jumped forward in time, with the next dated entry from 1975. May 4, 1975, Silver Thread officially decommissioned today, or so the public record will show. In reality, the network has been integrated into deeper infrastructure. My objections were noted and dismissed. I've begun documenting everything. Somebody needs to preserve the truth. The entries continued through decades, detailing how the colonel had systematically gathered evidence about Operation Silver Thread's evolution from a Cold War surveillance program into something more permanent and pervasive. His final entry, dated just 3 months before his death, was especially chilling. February 12, 2024. They've found me. After all these years, someone at the Pentagon realized I kept records. Hayes has been dead for decades, but his protégés continue his work. They've offered money, then threats. I've secured the core documentation and established contingencies. If you're reading this, you've found the first piece. The rest is waiting at the coordinates. Trust no one claiming military authority without independent verification. Jessica set down the notebook, her mind racing. If she was interpreting this correctly, Colonel Garrison had uncovered a domestic surveillance program dating back to the 1960s that had never truly been dismantled, one that apparently still concerned people at the Pentagon enough to send representatives to an obscure Montana farmhouse within hours of its new owner taking possession. She turned her attention to the manila envelope. Inside, she found what appeared to be original military orders establishing Operation Silver Thread, technical schematics for communications equipment, and most damning, a memorandum from 1968 explicitly authorizing surveillance of domestic elements, considered potentially destabilizing to national interests. Attached was a list of targeted organizations that included civil rights groups, anti-war protesters, and various political organizations, none of which had any legitimate connection to foreign powers or terrorism. More recent documents showed how the program had evolved and expanded with technology, transitioning from radio monitoring to digital surveillance. The final document was dated 2020, a Pentagon funding request that never mentioned Silver Thread by name, but contained equipment specifications identical to those in the original 1968 documents. The cipher device remained a mystery. Jessica examined it carefully, but couldn't determine its purpose without instructions. Perhaps it was meant to decode additional information not included in the case. A faint sound from outside snapped Jessica back to her immediate situation. She moved cautiously to the window and peered out through the rain-streaked glass. Nothing visible in the darkness, but her instincts told her someone might be watching the house. The visitors from earlier had retreated too easily. What if they were simply waiting for her to fall asleep before returning? Jessica quickly returned everything to the metal case except for the notebook, which she slipped into her pocket. She replaced the case in the safe, closed the display case concealing it, and returned to the living room, where Tyler still slept peacefully. What were her options? Staying put until morning seemed risky. The officers would return, possibly with reinforcements and less patience. Running immediately presented its own challenges. Where would they go in the middle of a rainy night? In an unfamiliar rural area? And abandoning the property meant leaving behind whatever other evidence Colonel Garrison had secured about Operation Silverthread. The notebook mentioned coordinates and the rest waiting somewhere. If she could decode that location, perhaps she could find whatever additional evidence the Colonel had hidden before the Pentagon representatives found it. But that would mean understanding the cipher device, which remained locked in the safe. As Jessica pondered her limited options, headlights briefly illuminated the living room curtains, a vehicle passing slowly on the access road. Not pulling in, just driving by. Reconnaissance, perhaps, checking if she was still there. Making her decision, Jessica gently woke Tyler. "Honey, we need to go on a little adventure," she whispered. Tyler rubbed his eyes, disoriented. "Now? It's still dark." "I know, buddy. But remember those army people? I think they might not be real army. We need to go talk to the sheriff, but we have to be super quiet about leaving." Tyler's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Like spies? Are we in danger?" Jessica balanced truth with reassurance. "Not exactly danger, but we need to be careful. Can you help me be really quiet while we get some things together?" Tyler nodded solemnly, fully awake now. "What do we need?" "Just some clothes and our emergency bag. We'll come back later." Jessica hoped she wasn't lying to her son. They moved silently through the house, Jessica collecting the few items they'd unpacked, while Tyler zipped his backpack. She considered taking the car, but the sound of the engine would announce their departure. The rain had subsided to a light drizzle, and the nearest neighbor, according to the property maps Linda had shown her, was only about a mile away across the fields. If they could reach that farmhouse, they could call for help. As they prepared to slip out the back door, Jessica had a sudden thought. She returned quickly to the Colonel's study and found a county map pinned to the wall. There, marked in faded highlighter, was the location of something labeled Thread Backup. It wasn't coordinates as the notebook had suggested, but an actual marked location about 5 miles from the farmhouse, an area labeled as Wilson Creek Gorge. Jessica took a photo of the map with her phone, then rejoined Tyler at the back door. The night air was cool and damp as they stepped outside, staying close to the house to remain in its shadow. Jessica led them away from the driveway, across the overgrown backyard, toward a line of trees that would provide cover for their escape. They had nearly reached the tree line when Tyler suddenly stumbled over something hidden in the tall grass. Jessica caught him before he fell, but the brief noise seemed thunderous in the quiet night. They froze, listening intently for any reaction. A beam of light swept across the front of the house, a flashlight. Someone was already on the property, moving stealthily around the perimeter. "Don't move," Jessica whispered, pulling Tyler down into a crouching position in the grass. The beam swept across the yard again, closer this time. Whoever was searching had heard something and was investigating. Jessica weighed their options. Making a run for the trees would create noise and movement that would surely attract attention. Staying put risked discovery if the searcher did a thorough sweep of the property. The farmhouse offered shelter and hiding places, but returning now meant crossing open ground in potential view of the flashlight. Before she could decide, Tyler tugged urgently at her sleeve and pointed to their right. There, half hidden in the tall grass about 20 feet away, was what appeared to be a storm cellar entrance. Twin doors lying almost flat against the ground, the kind that led to underground storage or tornado shelters common in rural properties. Jessica nodded her understanding. Staying low, they crawled carefully through the wet grass toward the cellar doors. The flashlight beam continued to sweep methodically across the front yard, moving gradually toward the back of the house. They needed to reach the cellar before the light found them. The cellar doors were weather-beaten wood, reinforced with rusted metal bands. A heavy padlock secured them, but the hasp was so corroded that Jessica was able to break it with a forceful "pull." The hinges creaked slightly as she lifted one door just enough for Tyler to slip inside. She followed quickly, lowering the door gently behind them. They found themselves on a short set of wooden steps leading down into darkness. Jessica used her phone's flashlight, keeping the brightness at its lowest setting to avoid any light. Escaping through cracks in the cellar doors. The space below was larger than she expected, a concrete-lined room about 15 feet square, with shelves along the walls containing dusty canning jars and ancient emergency supplies. But what immediately caught Jessica's attention was that one corner of the cellar didn't match the rest. While most of the space had concrete walls stained with decades of moisture, one section featured newer construction, a partition wall with a metal door that looked significantly more recent than the farmhouse itself. The door bore a faded stencil, "Com Station Delta, authorized personnel only." "Mom?" Tyler whispered. "Is that a secret army room?" Jessica stared at the door, Colonel Garrison's notebook suddenly feeling very heavy in her pocket. "I think it might be, honey." The metal door had a keypad lock, technology much newer than the 1960s origin of Operation Silverthread. The Colonel must have maintained and updated this space over the decades. But what would the access code be? Jessica tried the date from the Silverthread photograph, 0716-68. Nothing. She tried the Colonel's birth date, his military service number from one of the framed certificates, and several other combinations she could think of. None worked. Tyler tugged at her sleeve again. "Mom, look." He pointed to the underside of the wooden cellar steps, where something had been carved into the wood, letters and numbers, small enough to miss unless you were specifically looking at that exact spot. Delta Access. SCB 7142. Jessica entered. The code and the lock disengaged with a soft click. The door swung open to reveal a small room containing what appeared to be a military communications station. Unlike the rest of the property, this space was immaculately maintained, with equipment that looked operational despite its vintage appearance. A desk held an older model computer, powered off but connected to various devices. Maps covered one wall, with colored pins marking locations across Montana and neighboring states. A single metal filing cabinet stood against the far wall. It was locked, but the key was in the desk drawer, almost as if Colonel Garrison had expected someone to find this place. Inside the cabinet, Jessica discovered a treasure trove of documentation, files spanning decades, all meticulously organized and cross-referenced. One folder was labeled Silverthread Evolution 1968-2023 and contained what appeared to be a comprehensive history of the program, including names of officials who had authorized its continuation long after its supposed termination. Another folder labeled Contingency contained something even more valuable, a letter addressed to whom it may concern, dated 1 month before the Colonel's death, providing context for all the materials. I, Colonel Robert Garrison, Retty. being of sound mind, have compiled this documentation over my lifetime to reveal the existence and scope of Operation Silverthread, a domestic surveillance program that has operated without proper congressional oversight or public knowledge. Since 1968, I was among its founding officers and have spent decades documenting its illegality and unconstitutional nature. These materials are my insurance policy. Throughout my career, I made my concerns known through proper channels, only to be silenced, transferred, and eventually forced into retirement. I have attempted to bring these matters to the attention of oversight committees, inspectors general, and trusted journalists, only to find that Silverthread's influence extends into each of these spheres. Should you be reading this, it means I'm no longer able to protect this information personally. I entrust it to you with the hope that you will ensure it reaches those who can finally bring this program into the light and end decades of unconstitutional surveillance of American citizens. Be warned, there are those who will go to extraordinary lengths to recover or destroy these materials. Trust no one claiming military authority without independent verification of their credentials. The Pentagon's Document Recovery Division is not a legitimate military unit. It is a cover designation used by Silverthread operators to recover leaked documentation. For your protection, I have distributed copies of key documents to secure locations. You will find a flash drive in the lower right drawer containing encrypted copies of everything here, along with the locations of the backup materials. The cipher device in my office safe will decode the encryption. Good luck, and God bless America. Colonel Robert Garrison, United States Army, retired. Jessica's hands trembled as she reread the letter. This wasn't just old military history. It was evidence of an ongoing illegal surveillance program, and she was now its custodian. The colonel had left a blueprint for exposing decades of constitutional violations, and powerful people were already moving to contain it. She found the flash drive exactly where the letter indicated and pocketed it. As she continued exploring the small communications room, she discovered something that made her breath catch: a system of closed-circuit television cameras monitoring the farmhouse property. The screens were dark, but a simple power switch brought them to life, revealing multiple views of the exterior. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The black SUV had returned, now parked out of sight behind the barn. 3 individuals in dark clothing were methodically searching the property, one at the house's front door, one moving around the perimeter, and one heading directly toward the storm cellar where she and Tyler were hiding. "Mom?" Tyler's voice quavered slightly as he noticed the monitor. "Are those the fake army people?" "I think so, honey." Jessica's mind raced. The communications room had no other exit. Once the searcher discovered the cellar, it was only a matter of time before they found the hidden room. But Colonel Garrison, ever meticulous, had planned for this too. Another folder labeled Egress contained a detailed diagram of the communications room, including something labeled Emergency Exit Tunnel, behind a section of removable wall paneling. Jessica quickly located the panel and removed it, revealing a narrow passage reinforced with timbers. A battery-powered lantern hung on a hook just inside, still functional after all these years. "Tyler, we need to go through here," Jessica explained, keeping her voice calm for her son's benefit. "The colonel built a secret tunnel. Isn't that cool?" Tyler nodded, eyes wide but trusting. "Like in spy movies. Where does it go?" "Let's find out." Jessica activated the lantern and helped Tyler into the passage. Before following him, she grabbed as many of the Silverthread documents as she could fit into her small backpack, along with the flash drive and Colonel Garrison's letter. As the cellar doors above creaked open, Jessica pulled the panel closed behind her. The tunnel was narrow but tall enough for her to stand upright. Tyler moved ahead of her, seemingly more excited than frightened by this new development in their adventure. The passage stretched ahead into darkness, their lantern illuminating only a few feet at a time. According to the diagram, it extended approximately 200 yards, eventually emerging in a drainage culvert near Wilson Creek, the same area marked on the Colonel's map as S-thread backup. Jessica couldn't help but admire Colonel Garrison's foresight. He had created not just an archive of evidence, but an entire infrastructure to protect it and whoever might discover it. The question now was whether his preparations would be enough to keep her and Tyler safe from the people who had spent decades hiding Operation Silverthread from the public. As they made their way through the tunnel, Jessica heard distant sounds of movement from the cellar they'd left behind. Voices, footsteps, and the metallic sound of the communications room door being discovered. Their escape had come just in time. The tunnel gradually sloped upward, the packed earth giving way to concrete as they approached what appeared to be the culvert exit. A steel grate blocked the opening, but just as the diagram had indicated, it was secured with a simple latch mechanism on the inside, designed to allow exit but prevent entry from outside. Jessica released the latch, and the grate swung outward. They emerged into the pre-dawn darkness, the eastern sky just beginning to lighten. The culvert opened onto a small rocky creek bed, surrounded by pine trees and dense undergrowth that provided immediate cover. According to the Colonel's map, the S-thread backup location was upstream about half a mile. Jessica oriented herself using her phone's compass and the creek as reference points. They needed to move quickly. Once their pursuers discovered the tunnel, they would immediately check where it led. "Tyler, we need to be super quiet and move fast, okay?" Jessica whispered, helping her son scramble up the creek bank. "We're looking for something the Colonel hid near here." "Like a treasure hunt," Tyler whispered back, remarkably composed despite the stressful situation. Jessica marveled at her son's resilience. He was treating this dangerous escape as an adventure, trusting completely in her ability to keep him safe. She prayed that trust wasn't misplaced. They moved through the pine forest, paralleling the creek, staying within sight of the water but keeping to the trees for cover. The forest floor was soft with decades of fallen needles, allowing them to move quietly. As the sky continued to lighten, navigation became easier, but it also meant they would be more visible to pursuers. After about 15 minutes of careful progress, they reached an area where the creek widened into a small pool beneath a rocky outcropping, a natural landmark that matched the location marked on the Colonel's map. But what exactly was the backup they were looking for? Tyler, with a child's natural ability to spot the unusual, found it first. "Mom, look," he whispered, pointing to what appeared to be an ordinary boulder beside the pool. "It has a metal thing on it." The metal thing was a small military insignia, the same lightning bolt and shield design they'd seen in the Colonel's displays, affixed to the rock with what appeared to be industrial adhesive. When Jessica pressed it experimentally, a section of the boulder shifted slightly, revealing it to be artificial, a convincing fiberglass construction covering a small waterproof container embedded in the ground. Inside the container was another weatherproof case similar to the one in the Colonel's safe, but larger. And beside it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a satellite phone. Technology that would allow communication outside normal cell networks, impossible to intercept through conventional means. Jessica quickly examined the case's contents. As Colonel Garrison had promised in his letter, here was the rest of his documentation. Materials too sensitive to keep in the house, including what appeared to be the complete technical specifications of the Silverthread system, lists of surveillance targets dating to the present day, and most damning of all, financial records showing how the officially decommissioned program had continued to receive Pentagon funding through various obscured channels for over 50 years. The satellite phone came with a single pre-programmed number and a note in the colonel's handwriting: contingency contact, verified trustworthy. Also included was a current military identification card belonging to a Major Sarah Garrison, Office of the Inspector General. The colonel had allies within the military, including, apparently, a relative Jessica hadn't known existed. The sound of voices carried through the morning air, distant but approaching. Their pursuers had discovered the tunnel and were following their trail. Jessica made a quick decision and dialed the pre-programmed number on the satellite phone. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered, alert despite the early hour. "Verification phrase," the woman demanded without preamble. Jessica froze, not knowing the proper response. I found Colonel Garrison's materials," she said finally, "at the farmhouse in Pine Hollow. People are after us, me and my son." A pause. "How did you access the Delta station?" The voice was cautious but not hostile. "SCB-742, Jessica replied, remembering the code carved into the cellar steps. "There was a tunnel. We're at the creek location now." "The people following us aren't real military. Colonel Garrison left a letter explaining—" "Stop," the woman interrupted. "No details on this channel. You found my father's contingency package. That's enough for now." Another pause. "There's a gas station on Highway 12, about 2 miles east of your current position. Can you reach it?" Jessica thought of the terrain, the pursuing agents, and Tyler's stamina. "I think so, through the woods. Stay off roads and marked trails. Follow the creek east until it crosses under the highway. You're looking for Roy's Gas and Market, a small place with a blue awning. I can have someone there in 90 minutes. Ask for Earl Wilson. He'll verify with the phrase, 'storms coming from the west.' You respond with silver threads in the clouds. He'll keep you safe until I arrive." "Who are you?" Jessica asked. "Sarah Garrison. The colonel was my father. I've been waiting for someone to find his files for almost a year." Her voice softened slightly. "He prepared for this, Ms. Morgan. Trust his planning. 90 minutes at Roy's. Stay safe." The line went dead. Jessica slipped the satellite phone into her pocket alongside the flash drive. She considered the waterproof case with its damning documentation, too large to carry easily while helping Tyler navigate through unfamiliar woods with people in pursuit. Making another quick decision, she removed the most critical-looking documents and secured them in her backpack, then reburied the container exactly as they'd found it. The colonel had kept it hidden successfully for years. It would remain secure a little longer. "Tyler, we need to follow the creek that way," she explained, pointing eastward. "There's a gas station where someone's going to help us, but we need to move quickly and stay in the trees, okay? Like we're playing the quietest game of follow the leader ever." Tyler nodded solemnly. "Are the bad guys still following us?" As if in answer, a shout echoed through the trees behind them. Someone had spotted signs of their passage. They were running out of time. "Yes, honey, but we have a good head start." Jessica took her son's hand. "The colonel left us clues, like a treasure map. We just need to follow them to find the good guys." They set off along the creek, moving as quickly as possible while still taking care to stay quiet and leave minimal traces. The morning light strengthened, revealing the beauty of the Montana landscape they were traversing. Pine forests giving way to small meadows, the creek winding its way eastward toward the highway. Jessica kept them moving, her mind processing everything they'd discovered. Colonel Robert Garrison had spent decades documenting an illegal surveillance program, preparing meticulously for the day when someone would need to expose it. By sheer chance, that someone was now a single mother who had purchased his condemned farmhouse for $800, simply looking for an affordable place to rebuild her life with her son. The universe had a strange sense of humor. Or perhaps, as the colonel might have believed, Providence had played a hand. Either way, Jessica was now carrying documentation that could expose decades of constitutional violations at the highest levels of government, and the people who had kept those violations secret were right behind them. Highway 12 appeared ahead, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the landscape. As the colonel's directions had indicated, the creek passed beneath it through a large culvert. They moved carefully along the roadside, staying in the tree line until Roy's Gas and Market came into view. A small, weathered building with a faded blue awning, looking like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Jessica checked her watch. They'd made good time, but Sarah Garrison's help was still an hour away. They would need to stay hidden at the gas station, hoping this Earl Wilson was indeed the ally they needed. "Remember, Tyler," Jessica whispered as they prepared to cross. "The open space to the gas station. This is still our secret game. No talking about the colonel or the documents or the tunnel unless I say it's okay, all right?" Tyler nodded, his expression serious. "I'll only talk about it with the Silver Thread Cloud people." Jessica smiled despite their situation. "That's right, buddy. Just the Silver Thread Cloud people." Hand in hand, they emerged from the tree line and walked toward what they hoped was safety, carrying evidence that could shake the Pentagon to its foundations, all because of an $800 condemned farmhouse and the extraordinary man who had once called it home. Earl moved a small refrigerator aside, revealing a hidden compartment in the floor. From it, he extracted a metal case similar to the ones Jessica had found at the farmhouse, though this one was clearly newer. "Bob prepared for various scenarios," Earl explained, opening the case to reveal several prepaid cell phones, bundles of cash, and what appeared to be identification documents. "We need to assume they've identified you from the property records. Your vehicle is compromised. Even if Sarah arrives without incident, you'll need a new identity to get this evidence to safety." Jessica watched as Earl efficiently sorted through the contents, setting aside 2 sets of driver's licenses. One for an Amanda Phillips with Jessica's photo and a smaller ID for a Michael Phillips with Tyler's image. "When did Colonel Garrison prepare these?" Jessica asked, stunned by the level of preparation. "He couldn't have known I would buy the property." "He didn't," Earl confirmed. "These were made with placeholder images that Sarah updated once. The county records showed the property transfer. The colonel left instructions for multiple contingency identities. The photos were added last week when you started the purchasing process. That's..." Jessica struggled for words. "Invasive and incredibly thorough." Bob was nothing if not methodical. Earl handed her a bundle of cash, several $1,000s in mixed bills. "This should get you through the next few days if you need to separate from Sarah for any reason. The IDs will pass routine checks but won't hold up to intense scrutiny, so avoid airports." Tyler, who had been quietly listening while finishing his breakfast, finally spoke up. "Are we getting new names, like in witness protection?" Earl smiled kindly at the boy. "Just temporarily, son. Sometimes the good guys need to hide while they're collecting evidence to catch the bad guys." Jessica wasn't entirely comfortable with the ease with which her son was accepting these extraordinary circumstances, but she had to admit Tyler was handling things better than many adults would. "What about the documents?" she asked, patting her backpack where she'd stored the files from both of the colonel's hiding places. "Too risky to keep them all together," Earl decided. "If you're caught with everything, the entire operation is compromised." He retrieved an ordinary-looking first aid kit from beneath the sink and emptied its contents. "We'll split them. The most critical evidence goes with you and Sarah. I'll secure the rest through a separate channel." Jessica reluctantly removed the documents from her backpack, and together they sorted through them, identifying the most damning evidence: the signed orders establishing Silver Thread, the surveillance target lists, and the financial records showing its continued operation. These went back into Jessica's backpack, while Earl secured the rest in the repurposed first aid kit. "Now we wait," Earl said, checking his watch. Sarah should be... He was interrupted by an urgent beeping from the security monitor. The screen showed no vehicles in the parking lot, but a figure was approaching from the tree line behind the gas station. A woman in civilian hiking clothes moving with the purposeful stride of military training. "That's her," Earl confirmed, checking the time. 30 minutes early, that's our Sarah. He moved to the back door, unlocking it and opening it just as the woman reached it. Major Sarah Garrison was not what Jessica had expected. Instead of the stern, grey-haired military officer she had imagined, Sarah appeared to be in her late 30s, with her father's determined jawline but softer features. She wore no makeup, and her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her hiking clothes concealed her military bearing somewhat, but the alert assessment in her eyes gave her away as she entered, quickly scanning the room and its occupants. "Earl," she acknowledged with a nod, before turning to Jessica. "Ms. Morgan, I'm Sarah Garrison." Her gaze moved to Tyler, softening slightly. "And you must be Tyler. Thank you both for finding my father's evidence." "We didn't exactly find it intentionally," Jessica admitted. "I just needed an affordable house." A ghost of a smile touched Sarah's lips. Dad would appreciate the irony. He spent decades preparing for someone to discover his work, and it ends up being a single mother looking for a bargain. The smile faded as she turned serious again. "I need to know exactly what you found and who's pursuing you." Jessica recounted the events once more. The safe, the journals, the hidden communications room, and the waterproof case by the creek. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification on specific documents or exact wording from her father's notes. "The people following you are definitely Silver Thread operatives," she confirmed when Jessica described the visitors. "The division doesn't officially exist, but they maintain a small team of military and intelligence personnel who handle information security, their euphemism for suppressing evidence of the program's existence." "Why haven't you been able to expose them before now?" Jessica asked. "You're military intelligence. Couldn't you access this information through official channels?" Sarah's expression hardened. "I've tried for years. My father brought me into his confidence when I joined the army. As Inspector General Staff, I have some latitude to investigate potential violations, but Silver Thread is compartmentalized beyond ordinary security protocols. Without hard evidence, the kind my father collected, I couldn't gain traction. Any inquiry I initiated mysteriously stalled or was rerouted." She gestured to Jessica's backpack. "Those documents represent 20 years of my father's work and 3 years of my own. Together, they provide the first comprehensive proof of Silver Thread's existence, operations, and constitutional violations." Earl, who had been monitoring the security feeds while they talked, suddenly tensed. "Vehicle approaching. Black SUV." Sarah moved immediately to the monitor. "That's them. We need to move now." She turned to Jessica and Tyler. "Is there anything else from the farmhouse that you need? Any personal belongings you can't leave behind?" Jessica thought of their hastily packed bags still sitting in the farmhouse living room, containing most of what they owned. But none of it was irreplaceable, except for one item. Tyler's stuffed dinosaur. It's in his backpack. Tyler hugged his backpack protectively. "I've got Rex right here, Mom." "Then we're ready," Jessica confirmed. "My truck is behind the building," Earl said, handing Sarah a set of keys. "Looks ordinary, but your father made some modifications. Extra fuel capacity, compartments in the bed, signal blockers. Should get you to the safe house without being tracked." Sarah nodded. "And you?" "I'll delay them, then go dark with my portion of the evidence. We'll reconnect at the secondary site in 3 days, as planned." The black SUV was now pulling into the gas station's lot. There was no time for extended goodbyes. Earl quickly ushered them through the back door while returning to the front of the store, shotgun in hand, but carefully concealed behind the counter. Sarah led them to an aging Ford pickup parked behind a stack of empty pallets. Despite its weathered exterior, the engine turned over immediately, purring with a power that suggested significant modifications beneath the hood. "Stay low," Sarah instructed as they pulled away from the gas station, taking a narrow service road that ran behind the building rather than the main highway. "There's a blanket behind the seat if you need to completely conceal yourselves." Jessica helped Tyler into the back seat, then climbed in beside him, keeping below window level. Through the rear window, she could see two figures entering the gas station, a man and woman in civilian clothes, but moving with unmistakable military precision. "Will Earl be okay?" she asked, suddenly worried for the old veteran who had helped them. "Earl's been playing this game longer than I've been alive," Sarah replied, keeping her eyes on the rough road ahead. "He knows how to handle himself. If anyone can delay them without raising suspicion, it's him." They followed the service road for about a mile before it intersected with a smaller highway heading north. Sarah drove precisely at the speed limit, fast enough to put distance between them and the gas station, but not so fast as to attract attention. "Where are we going?" Jessica asked after several minutes of tense silence. "Safe house about 100 miles from here," Sarah replied. "One of my father's contingency locations. Remote, defensible and off the grid. We'll secure the evidence there, then reach out to my contacts." "What contacts?" "People my father and I cultivated over the years. Journalists, congressional staffers, trustworthy FBI agents. We'll need multiple channels to release the information simultaneously, so no single point can be controlled or suppressed." Tyler, who had been quietly watching the Montana landscape roll by, spoke up. "Like when the colonel's computer got erased before he could tell people." Sarah glanced at the boy in the rearview mirror, clearly surprised by his understanding. "Exactly like that. Your son catches on quickly," she added to Jessica. "Too quickly sometimes," Jessica replied with a hint of maternal pride. They drove in silence for several more miles before Sarah spoke again. "I should explain more about Silverthread, what it is, why it matters, and why these people are willing to go to such lengths to keep it secret." "Please do," Jessica said. "I've seen the documents, but I still don't fully understand the significance." Sarah checked her mirrors before beginning. Operation Silverthread began in 1968 as a contingency communications network to maintain government control during potential civil unrest. The official justification was preparation for Soviet aggression, but the real target was domestic: the anti-war movement, civil rights activists, student organizations. She navigated a sharp curve before continuing. The technology was primitive. By today's standards, wiretaps, radio monitoring, mail intercepts. But the precedent it established was profound. A secret system operating outside normal oversight, with its own secure funding channels and personnel who were essentially ghost operatives whose assignments didn't appear in regular military records. "Ditakus, and this continued after the Cold War ended?" Jessica asked. "Not only continued, but expanded. As technology evolved, so did Silverthread. They incorporated computer surveillance, cell phone monitoring, eventually internet tracking, all without warrants, all outside the established intelligence community's official operations. By the early 2000s, they had capabilities that even the NSA would consider overreach." "But why?" Jessica pressed. "What's the purpose now?" Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Power and leverage. The information Silverthread collects isn't used for traditional national security. It's used to influence, pressure, and control. The program identifies potential threats to established power structures and neutralizes them before they gain traction." "That sounds like a conspiracy theory," Jessica said skeptically. Most effective conspiracies do, Sarah replied without irony. My father wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was a communications expert who saw a classified program morphing into something dangerous. The people who run Silverthread today aren't shadowy Illuminati figures. They're bureaucrats, military officers, and intelligence officials who believe they're protecting America by controlling information flows and eliminating potential disruptions before they occur. And the evidence we have proves all this? It proves the existence, structure, and unconstitutional nature of the program, Sarah confirmed. More importantly, it names names, the chain of command, the authorization signatures, the funding sources. It's not just speculation anymore, it's documented fact. Tyler had been listening intently. Is that why they want to catch us? Because we know their secret names. Sarah met the boy's eyes in the rearview mirror. That's exactly right, Tyler. People who do secret things don't want their names connected to those secrets. Jessica put her arm around her son protectively. I'm still not clear on why Colonel Garrison didn't take this information to the proper authorities while he was alive. He was a respected military officer with decades of service. He tried, Sarah said, echoing what Earl had told them earlier. Multiple times through multiple channels. Each attempt was blocked, discredited, or simply buried. The last time, in 2018, nearly got him killed. That's when he began preparing the contingency plans that you've discovered. Including falsified IDs and cash stores? Jessica asked. My father believed in being prepared for all scenarios, Sarah said simply. After his last attempt to expose Silverthread failed, he became convinced that the only way to break through would be a comprehensive, simultaneous disclosure through multiple independent channels. Too many points of release for Silverthread to control. She checked her mirrors again, her expression tightening. We may have a tail, blue sedan, 3 cars back. It's taken the same 4 turns we have. Jessica resisted the urge to look behind them. What do? We find out if they're actually following us. Sarah took a sudden turn onto a side road, then another quick turn into the parking lot of a roadside diner. She pulled around to the back of the building, positioning the truck so they could see the road without being obvious. If they drive past, we're clear. If they turn in, we have confirmation. Tense seconds passed as they watched the road. A minute later, the blue sedan appeared, slowing as it approached the diner. It continued past without turning, but at a speed that suggested the driver was searching for something. Not definitive, Sarah murmured, but concerning. We need to change vehicles. She pulled out her phone, sent a quick text, then put the truck back in gear. We have a fallback option about 20 minutes from here. As they pulled back onto the road, taking a different route than they had arrived on, Jessica noticed Sarah checking her mirrors more frequently. The blue sedan was nowhere in sight, but her tension hadn't decreased. How would they have found us so quickly? Jessica asked. We left no trail from the gas station. They're resource-rich and determined, Sarah replied. They could have surveillance on all major roads leaving the area, or they might have tracking capabilities we haven't considered. She frowned. Did you use your cell phone at all since finding the documents? Just to take a photo of the map in your father's study, Jessica admitted. And I had it on when we escaped through the woods. That's probably it. Silverthread has advanced signal interception capabilities. If they identified your phone at the farmhouse, they could track its movements. Sarah reached into the glove compartment and removed a small device. Faraday pouch. Put your phone in here. It blocks all signals. Jessica complied, slipping her phone into the metallic fabric pouch. Should I be worried that your father anticipated all of this so precisely? A grim smile touched Sarah's lips. My father spent 40 years in military communications and another 20 studying Silverthread's capabilities. He knew exactly what we'd be facing. The smile faded. I just wish he'd lived to see the exposure he worked so hard to achieve. They drove in silence for several more minutes before Sarah turned onto a narrow dirt road that wound through dense pine forest. After about a mile, the trees opened to reveal a small service garage with a couple of vehicles parked outside. A middle-aged woman in oil-stained coveralls was working under the hood of an old Jeep. Sarah pulled up beside the building and cut the engine. "Wait here," she instructed, stepping out of the truck. Through the window, Jessica watched as Sarah approached the mechanic. They spoke briefly and the woman nodded, wiping her hands on a rag before heading into the garage. Sarah returned to the truck. "Maggie's an old friend of my father's," she explained. "She's going to loan us her personal vehicle and take Earl's truck elsewhere to create a diversion. We'll switch everything over and be on our way in 10 minutes. True to her word, within minutes they were transferring their meager belongings and the crucial documents to a nondescript grey SUV with Montana plates. Maggie took Earl's truck with a brief nod to Sarah and a curious glance at Jessica and Tyler. "She doesn't ask questions," Sarah explained as they pulled away in their new vehicle. "That's why my father trusted her. Everyone in his network operates on a need-to-know basis. It's safer for all involved." The grey SUV was less powerful than Earl's modified truck, but newer and less conspicuous. Sarah drove with the same careful attention to speed limits and traffic laws, taking periodic detours to ensure they weren't being followed. After nearly 2 hours of driving, they turned onto an unpaved forest road that climbed steadily into the mountains. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, with spectacular views of valleys and distant peaks that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. "Almost there," Sarah announced as they rounded a particularly sharp curve. "Safe house is just ahead. Udun." The safe house turned out to be a surprisingly modern cabin nestled against a rocky hillside, partially concealed by pine trees but with clear sightlines in all directions. Solar panels on the roof suggested it had power despite its remote location, and a satellite dish indicated communications capability. Sarah pulled into a small garage built into the hillside and closed the door behind them with a remote control. "Welcome to Echo Base," she said with a hint of irony. "My father was a Star Wars fan." Inside, the cabin was a curious mix of rustic comfort and high-tech security. The main living area featured comfortable furniture, a wood-burning stove, and a fully equipped kitchen, while a separate room contained communications equipment that wouldn't have looked out of place in a military command center. "The Colonel built all this?" Jessica asked, impressed despite the circumstances. "Over decades," Sarah confirmed. "He purchased the land in the 70s when it was worthless backcountry, built the cabin himself initially, then gradually upgraded it as technology advanced, and his concerns about silver thread grew. The solar system, satellite communications, and security features were added in the last 10 years. Tyler, who had been remarkably patient throughout the long drive, immediately began exploring the cabin with the natural curiosity of an 8-year-old. "Mom, there's bunk beds," he called from a side room. "Can I have the top one?" "Of course." "Honey," Jessica called back, grateful for his resilience and ability to find normalcy in their extraordinary situation. Sarah gestured to the dining table. "Let's secure those documents and plan our next steps." Together they spread out the materials Jessica had carried from the farmhouse, the most critical evidence of Silver Thread's existence and operations. Sarah examined each document with professional thoroughness, occasionally making notes or taking photographs with a dedicated camera that Jessica suspected wasn't connected to any network. "This is even more comprehensive than I hoped," she said finally. "My father documented every aspect of the program: technical specifications, personnel, funding sources, operational directives. Most crucially, he tracked its evolution from a Cold War contingency into what it is today, A domestic surveillance apparatus operating outside constitutional constraints. So what happens now? Jessica asked, watching as Sarah carefully returned the documents to a waterproof case similar to the ones the Colonel had used. Now, we implement the final phase of my father's plan, Sarah replied. Simultaneous disclosure through multiple channels, too many for Silverthread to contain. I have contacts ready in 3 news organizations, 2 congressional offices, and the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. Once they receive this evidence with proper authentication, the program's secrecy is finished. Will that be enough? Jessica wasn't convinced. If this program has operated secretly for 50 years, despite previous exposure attempts, what's different now? Sarah's expression was grim but determined. The political landscape, for one thing. Surveillance overreach is a bipartisan concern. Now, the technology angle, Silverthread's capabilities far exceed what the public believes possible, which will generate appropriate outrage. And most importantly, the comprehensive nature of the evidence. Previous attempts relied on fragments, whistleblower testimony, or indirect documentation. She tapped the case. This is the complete blueprint with signatures, dates, and direct quotes from those responsible. Jessica wasn't entirely reassured. And what happens to Tyler and me in the meantime? Those people are still looking for us, and they know our names, my car, probably our description. You'll stay here initially, Sarah said. It's secure, stocked with supplies and off-grid. Once the disclosures begin, I'll arrange proper protection, either through official channels once Silverthread is exposed, or through my own network if necessary. She hesitated, then added, I understand this isn't what you signed up for. You were just looking for an affordable home, not to become entangled in a decades-long conspiracy. I'm sorry about that, but I'm also grateful. Without you, my father's work might never have come to light. Jessica thought about the strange turn her life had taken in just 24 hours. Yesterday, her biggest concern had been how to repair a condemned farmhouse on a tight budget. Now she was hiding in a remote mountain cabin involved in exposing a secret government program, with people potentially willing to harm her and Tyler to keep that program hidden. I'm not sure if I should thank Colonel Garrison or curse him, she said finally. A rare smile touched Sarah's face. My father had that effect on people. He was brilliant, determined, and absolutely convinced of the righteousness of his cause. He was also headstrong, secretive, and occasionally paranoid, though in his case, the paranoia was justified. They were interrupted by Tyler returning from his exploration of the cabin. There's a secret door in the back of the closet, he announced excitedly. It goes to a tunnel with supplies and stuff. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Another of my father's contingency measures. It leads to a secondary exit about a quarter mile away, in case the main entrance is compromised. Jessica looked at her son, suddenly struck by how easily he was adapting to these extraordinary circumstances. To him, this was an adventure. Secret tunnels, hidden exits, coded messages. The danger hadn't fully registered with him yet. Tyler, honey, why don't you get Rex settled in on your bunk while I talk with Major Garrison a bit more, she suggested. Once Tyler had returned to the bedroom, Jessica turned to Sarah with renewed seriousness. I need to know the worst case scenario. What are we really up against if these Silverthread people find us before you can release the evidence? Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. The people pursuing you operate in a grey area. They have resources and authority borrowed from legitimate military and intelligence channels. But their actions aren't officially sanctioned. They've gone to extreme lengths in the past to protect Silverthread's secrecy, including intimidation, evidence tampering, and character assassination. Have they ever hurt people? Jessica pressed. Physically, I mean. Sarah's hesitation was answer enough. There have been incidents, nothing directly provable, but suspicious accidents, unexpected health crises. My father believed his last heart attack wasn't entirely natural, though I could never find evidence to support that. Jessica felt cold despite the cabin's comfortable temperature. And you think they'd harm a child? No, Sarah said firmly. They operate under a twisted sense of patriotic duty. In their minds, they're protecting national security, not committing crimes. Harming a child crosses lines that even they wouldn't approach. She leaned forward, meeting Jessica's eyes directly. But they would use Tyler as leverage against you, threaten custody issues, create false allegations of parental unfitness, perhaps even attempt to involve Child Protective Services under fabricated concerns. They fight dirty, but within certain boundaries. That's not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's the reality we're facing. Sarah stood and moved to a cabinet, retrieving a satellite phone similar to the one they'd found at the creek location. We need to move quickly. Every hour that passes gives them more time to mobilize resources and narrow their search area. She began dialing. I'm contacting my primary media connection first, a producer at a major news network who's been investigating domestic surveillance for years. Once she has the evidence, the others will follow in sequence. Jessica watched as Sarah spoke in clipped, precise terms, using what sounded like pre-arranged code phrases to establish identity and authenticity. After a brief conversation, she ended the call and immediately dialed another number. Congressional contact confirmed, she reported after the second call. They're sending a secure courier to a meeting point 2 hours from here. The media team will rendezvous at a different location 3 hours out. She checked her watch. If everything goes according to plan, the initial disclosures will begin within 24 hours. And if it doesn't go according to plan? Jessica couldn't help asking. Then we move to contingency protocols, Sarah replied with a confidence that suggested she'd contemplated every possible outcome. My father didn't spend decades building this network to have it fail at the crucial moment. Outside, the mountain afternoon was giving way to evening, golden sunlight slanting through the pine trees surrounding the cabin. In another context, it would have been peaceful, even idyllic. Jessica found herself wondering if she would ever experience normal life again. The mundane concerns of work deadlines, school lunches, and household budgets that had seemed so pressing just days ago. Sarah must have read something of her thoughts in her expression. This won't last forever, she said, softer than before. Once Silver Thread is exposed, the immediate danger passes. There will be investigations, political fallout, probably congressional hearings. But the people currently hunting you will be too busy saving themselves to worry about you and Tyler. And then what? Jessica asked. We just go back to our lives after all this? That will be your choice, Sarah said. My father arranged for financial compensation for whoever found his evidence. Enough to rebuild your life wherever you choose. You could return to Portland, stay in Montana, move anywhere else. The condemned farmhouse is still legally yours, though I suspect you'll have little interest in living there now. Jessica laughed without humor. The $800 farmhouse with the secret military bunker. Yeah, I think I'll pass. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. She read it quickly, her expression darkening. Earl's been compromised. Silver Thread. Operatives took him into custody at the gas station shortly after we left. Jessica felt a stab of guilt. Because he helped us. Because he's been on their watch list for years, Sarah corrected. My father wasn't the only one documenting Silver Thread's activities. Earl was always a secondary target. She typed a rapid response before continuing. My source says he's being held at a local sheriff's office on fabricated charges, creating a pretext for formal detention while they question him. Will he tell them about this place? Sarah shook her head confidently. Earl's a decorated Vietnam veteran who survived 2 years as a POW. He knows how to withstand interrogation, but his detention accelerates our timeline. We need to move. The evidence tonight, not tomorrow. She began gathering the documents, securing them in a specialized backpack with what appeared to be armor plating in its construction. I'll make the deliveries personally. You and Tyler will stay here. It's still the safest location. Jessica felt a surge of alarm. You're leaving us alone? The cabin has extensive security systems, emergency supplies, and the escape tunnel, Tyler found. If anything happens, there's a detailed contingency protocol in the desk drawer in the communications room. Sarah's tone softened slightly at Jessica's evident concern. This is the safest place you could possibly be right now. Except that Earl knows about it, Jessica pointed out. If they make him talk... Earl doesn't know the exact location, Sarah countered. My father compartmentalized information even within his trusted circle. Earl knows about the cabin's existence, but not its coordinates. Only 3 people ever knew those. My father, myself, and now you. She continued preparing for departure, checking equipment and communications devices with practiced efficiency. I'll be back by dawn. Once the documents are delivered, the most dangerous period begins, the window between silver thread. Realizing exposure is imminent and the actual public revelations, that's when they'll be most desperate. Jessica watched Sarah's methodical preparations, trying to reconcile this determined military intelligence officer with the daughter of the eccentric colonel whose property she'd purchased. There was clearly much of her father in her. The same meticulous attention to detail, the same unwavering commitment to exposing what they both saw as a profound threat to constitutional governance. Why do you do this? Jessica asked suddenly. Your career, your safety, you're risking everything. Sarah paused in her preparations, considering the question seriously. The same reason my father did. We both took an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Silver thread represents a domestic threat to the Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches. It's that simple. She zipped the reinforced backpack closed and slung it over her shoulder. Besides, my father dedicated the last 30 years of his life to this cause. Seeing it through is the best way I can honor his memory. As Sarah prepared to leave, Tyler emerged from the bedroom, Rex the dinosaur tucked under his arm. Are you going to catch the bad guys? He asked with 8-year-old directness. Sarah knelt to his level. Not exactly catch them, more like tell everyone what they've been doing so they can't do it anymore. Tyler nodded seriously, like when kids at school do mean things and we tell the teacher. Very much like that. Sarah agreed, except these are grown-ups who should know better, and we're telling everyone, not just the teacher. Will you come back? Tyler asked. Absolutely, Sarah promised. By breakfast time, and then we'll figure out what happens next. With final instructions about the cabin's security systems and emergency protocols, Sarah departed into the gathering mountain twilight, leaving Jessica and Tyler alone in the hidden safe house built by a man they'd never met, but whose lifetime of paranoia and preparation had become their lifeline. The tunnel was narrow, but tall enough for an adult to move through comfortably, reinforced with timber supports and illuminated by small LED lights that activated automatically as they entered. Jessica closed the hidden door behind them, hearing the soft click of its locking mechanism engaging. Tyler moved ahead of her, treating the escape as another exciting element of their adventure rather than the desperate flight it actually was. "Mom, there are supplies in here," he whispered. pointing to metal shelving units along one side of the tunnel. The shelves held bottled water, energy bars, first aid supplies, and even spare clothing in various sizes. Another example of the Colonel's meticulous preparation. "Grab a backpack," Jessica instructed, pointing to several hanging on hooks. "Put in some water and food, just like we practiced for emergency drills at home." While Tyler filled a child-sized backpack, Jessica quickly gathered essentials into a larger one: water, food, a first aid kit, a thermal blanket, flashlights, and the satellite phone Sarah had left in case of emergency. She kept the handgun secured but accessible in her jacket pocket, still hoping she wouldn't need to use it. The tunnel stretched ahead, curving gradually as it followed the natural contour of the mountainside. Jessica estimated they had traveled about a quarter-mile when they reached a junction. The main passage continued straight ahead, while a narrower offshoot branched to the left. "Which way?" Tyler whispered, looking to her for guidance. Jessica consulted the emergency protocol instructions she'd memorized. "Main tunnel leads to the exit. Side passage goes to an observation point." The observation point could potentially provide information about whoever had breached the cabin, how many, their equipment, whether they were the same people who had confronted her at the farmhouse. But it would also delay their escape, possibly putting them at greater risk. "Let's check the observation point first," she decided. "Just quickly, then we'll continue to the exit." The side passage was narrower, requiring them to proceed single file. After about 50 feet, it ended at a small chamber with what appeared to be a sophisticated periscope system embedded in the rocky ceiling. A control panel with a small screen sat beside it. Jessica activated the system according to the labeled instructions. The screen illuminated, showing multiple views of the cabin from concealed exterior cameras. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. 3 individuals in tactical gear, methodically searching the cabin. They moved with the disciplined precision of military or paramilitary training, communicating via hand signals rather than speech. Each carried what appeared to be a military-grade weapon and wore night vision goggles. These weren't the same people who had confronted her at the farmhouse. Those had maintained the pretense of official authority. These operators had abandoned any such facade. As she watched, one of them discovered the hidden door in the closet. He signaled to the others, and they quickly prepared to follow. "We need to move," Jessica whispered urgently, shutting down the observation system. "They've found the tunnel entrance." They hurried back to the main passage and continued toward the exit, moving as quickly as caution allowed. Tyler kept pace, without complaint, seeming to understand the gravity of their situation despite his age. Jessica's mind raced through their limited options. The emergency protocols mentioned a vehicle concealed near the tunnel exit, an ATV stored in a camouflage shelter with keys in the ignition. If they could reach it before their pursuers caught up, they might escape into the surrounding wilderness. But then what? They were miles from the nearest town, in unfamiliar mountain terrain, with limited supplies and no way to contact Sarah, who was presumably still making her document deliveries. The satellite phone was pre-programmed with emergency contacts, but Jessica had no way of knowing if any of those people could reach them in time. The tunnel began to slope upward more steeply, and the air grew noticeably fresher. They were nearing the exit. A final turn brought them to a steel door with a simple mechanical lock. No electronic components that could fail or be compromised. Jessica used the key from her emergency pack to unlock it, easing the door open just enough to peer outside. The exit opened into a small clearing surrounded by dense pine forest. Moonlight filtered through the branches, providing minimal illumination. About 20 feet away stood a small shed constructed to blend with the natural environment, its exterior covered with the same pine bark as the surrounding trees. This would be where the ATV was stored. Jessica listened intently for any sound of pursuit from the tunnel behind them. Nothing yet, but their pursuers would be moving quickly, now that they knew their quarry had escaped the cabin. "Tyler, we're going to run to that shed," she whispered, pointing. "Stay right beside me. Ready?" At his nod, they slipped through the door and sprinted across the clearing. The shed's door was secured with another mechanical lock that yielded to the same key. Inside, as promised, was a rugged ATV with additional supplies strapped to its cargo rack. The keys hung from the ignition, ready for immediate use. Jessica quickly checked the vehicle. Full fuel tank, operational lights, GPS unit mounted on the handlebars. Another example of the Colonel's thoroughness. She helped Tyler climb onto the passenger seat behind her, making sure he was secure. With his arms wrapped firmly around her waist, "Hold on tight," she instructed. "We need to move quickly, but I'll be careful." As she turned the key and the ATV's engine rumbled to life, a beam of light swept across the clearing, a flashlight from the tunnel exit. Their pursuers had arrived. Jessica didn't hesitate. She opened the throttle and the ATV surged forward, bursting out of the shed and into the forest. The vehicle's headlight illuminated a narrow trail leading away from the clearing, another piece of the Colonel's escape infrastructure, a prepared route through otherwise impassable terrain. Behind them, shouts and the sound of additional engines confirmed their pursuers were mobilizing their own vehicles. The chase had begun in earnest. The trail twisted through the forest, occasionally branching. Jessica followed the main path, trusting in the Colonel's design while maintaining the highest speed she dared, with Tyler holding on behind her. The ATV handled the rough terrain capably, its suspension absorbing the worst bumps and dips. "Mom, they're following!" Tyler called over the engine's roar. Glancing back, Jessica saw headlights weaving through the trees behind them, still distant but clearly in pursuit. The trail descended into a shallow ravine, crossed a small stream, then climbed steeply up the opposite bank. As they crested the rise, Jessica saw the path ahead branched into 3 separate trails, each heading in a different direction into the dense forest. Which one to choose? There was no obvious main path now, no indication of which route the Colonel had intended as the primary escape route. Jessica made a split-second decision, taking the rightmost trail that appeared to lead downhill toward lower elevation. If they could reach less rugged terrain, more options for longer-term escape might become available. The ATV's headlight illuminated. The trail just far enough ahead for Jessica to navigate safely, but not far enough to provide much advance warning of hazards or obstacles. She maintained a careful balance between speed and caution, constantly aware of Tyler's safety as well as the pursuers behind them. The forest thinned slightly as they continued downhill, the trail becoming less defined, but the terrain more navigable. After several minutes of tense driving, they emerged from the tree line onto what appeared to be a rarely used logging road, wide enough for standard vehicles, but rutted and overgrown with disuse. Jessica paused at this junction, considering their options. The logging road offered faster travel, but less cover. Continuing through the forest would be slower, but might provide better opportunities to evade pursuit. The decision was made for her as 2 sets of headlights appeared on the trail behind them. Their pursuers had split up, probably taking all 3 branches of the trail to ensure they didn't lose their quarry. Jessica gunned the engine and turned onto the logging road, hoping that greater speed would compensate for the increased visibility. The ATV accelerated quickly on the more open terrain, reaching nearly 40 miles per hour despite the rough surface. Tyler clung tightly to Jessica, his small form pressed against her back as they bounced over ruts and potholes. The wind rushed past them, surprisingly cold in the mountain night, and Jessica regretted not grabbing warmer clothing before their hasty escape. A glance at the GPS unit showed their position relative to surrounding landmarks, but offered little strategic guidance. They were heading generally east, away from the cabin, and toward what appeared to be a more developed road several miles ahead. If they could reach it, they might find help. or at least more options for evasion. The pursuing vehicles were gaining. Larger and more powerful than the ATV, they handled the logging road's rough surface better at higher speeds. Jessica estimated they had perhaps 2 minutes before their pursuers would be within range to attempt stopping them. Ahead, the logging road curved sharply around a steep hill. As they rounded the bend, Jessica was startled to see headlights approaching from the opposite direction, a vehicle moving up the road toward them. Friend or foe? Impossible to tell in the darkness. She slowed slightly, preparing to veer off-road. If necessary, the approaching vehicle's high beams suddenly flashed twice in rapid succession, then twice again, a signal of some kind. Recognition dawned as Jessica recalled something from the emergency protocols. A friendly contact would signal with exactly that pattern. As the vehicle drew closer, Jessica recognized the gray SUV that Sarah had used to transport them to the cabin. Relief flooded through her. Sarah had returned, perhaps alerted by the cabin's security system when it was breached. The SUV slowed as it approached, and Sarah's voice called out, "Jessica, Tyler, get in, quickly!" Jessica brought the ATV to a stop alongside the SUV. The rear door swung open, and she helped Tyler dismount and climb inside before following him. Sarah was already accelerating away before Jessica had fully closed the door. "How did you find us?" Jessica asked, breathless from the adrenaline and exertion. "Emergency alert from the cabin," Sarah confirmed, eyes fixed on the rough road ahead as she drove with practiced skill. "I was on my way back from the final document delivery when the signal came through. The system transmitted the breach and your escape route. The people at the cabin—" "Silver Thread Recovery Team," Sarah finished grimly, more aggressive than their usual approach. "They must be getting desperate." In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared around the bend they had just navigated, their pursuers still determined. Sarah pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing the SUV to its limits on the uneven surface. "Did you deliver all the documents?" Jessica asked, securing her seatbelt and checking that Tyler was properly restrained. Beside her, Sarah nodded. "All 3 sets to separate contacts. The media release is scheduled for 6 a.m. Eastern Time, less than 5 hours from now. Congressional oversight committees will receive their packages simultaneously. Then we just need to survive. Until morning," Jessica said, attempting to keep her voice steady for Tyler's benefit. "That's the plan." Sarah's tone was professional but tense. "Once the documents go public, Silver Thread's operational priority will shift from recovery to damage control. The teams pursuing us will likely be recalled for crisis management." The SUV crested a rise, and suddenly they were on a paved road, narrow and rural, but properly maintained. Sarah immediately increased their speed, the vehicle handling much better on the smooth surface. Their pursuers remained visible in the distance, but were no longer gaining ground. "Where are we going?" Tyler asked, his first words since their reunion with Sarah. "Somewhere safe, buddy," Sarah replied, her tone softening slightly when addressing the boy. "I have one more contingency location about 30 miles from here. By the time we arrive, the documents should be public, and the immediate danger will be passing." Jessica wasn't entirely convinced. "These people breached a highly secure cabin and pursued us through remote forest at night. Will a public disclosure really stop them so quickly?" "It changes the equation," Sarah explained. "Right now, they're operating in the shadows with plausible deniability. Once Silver Thread is exposed, every action they take carries the risk of compounding their legal jeopardy. Most of these operators are career military or intelligence. When the mission parameters shift to damage control, they'll follow orders and stand down." "Most of them," Jessica noted. "Most," Sarah acknowledged. "There may be some true believers who continue the pursuit, but without organizational support, they'll be limited in what they can do." The road curved through the mountain landscape, occasionally passing isolated homes and cabins. their windows dark in the late-night hours. After several miles, Sarah turned onto a more substantial highway, immediately accelerating to the speed limit. "We've lost our tail," she announced after checking the mirrors. "They either turned off or fell too far behind. Either way, we have some breathing room." Jessica felt Tyler relax slightly beside her. "Are we winning?" he asked. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile Jessica had seen from her. "Yes, Tyler, we're winning. Your mom has been incredibly brave, and thanks to her, some very important truth is about to come out. Like when kids at school tell lies, and the teacher finds out the truth. Exactly like that, but bigger, much bigger." They drove in, silence for several minutes, the highway empty at this late hour. Jessica found herself watching the clock on the dashboard, counting down the hours until the scheduled disclosure. 4 hours and 23 minutes until Silver Thread became public knowledge. Sarah eventually turned onto another secondary road, this one winding through a more populated area with small ranches and rural homes. After several miles, she pulled into the driveway of a modest single-story house set well back from the road, surrounded by mature trees that provided natural screening. "One of my father's properties," Sarah explained as she parked beside the house, "purchased through a corporate entity with no connection to his name or military service. It doesn't appear in any of his personal records." The house appeared ordinary, a typical rural Montana residence with a covered porch and detached garage. Nothing about it suggested a safe house or contingency location. "It's not fortified like the cabin," Sarah continued, leading them to the front door and disarming. "A concealed security system. My father believes sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight. This looks like any other home in the area." Inside, the house was comfortably furnished but sparsely decorated. No personal photographs or identifying items were visible. Nothing that would connect it to Colonel Garrison or his daughter. "The neighbors know this as a vacation property owned by out-of-state residents who visit occasionally," Sarah explained. "Several people connected to my father's network have used it over the years when they needed to disappear temporarily." She checked her watch. 3 hours and 45 minutes until disclosure. We should be safe here until then." Tyler, exhausted from their ordeal, was practically asleep on his feet. Jessica helped him to a bedroom, where he quickly fell asleep, still clutching Rex the dinosaur, not even bothering to remove his shoes. She covered him with a blanket and kissed his forehead before returning to the living room where Sarah was, monitoring several devices spread across the dining table. "Updates from my contacts," she explained. "The news organizations are preparing their stories, verifying final details before publication. Congressional staffers are briefing their bosses. It's happening." "And then what?" Jessica asked, the question that had been nagging at her since this began. "What happens to Tyler and me after Silver Thread is exposed?" Sarah looked up from her screens. "That depends partly on what you want. The immediate danger will subside once the program is exposed and investigations begin. Those responsible will be focused on legal defenses, not pursuing witnesses." "So we could just go back to normal life?" Jessica couldn't quite believe it would be that simple. "Eventually, yes. There might be a period where protective custody is advisable. You are material witnesses to both the evidence and the attempts to suppress it. But that would be official protection through legitimate channels, not hiding in safe houses." Sarah hesitated, then continued. "My father made financial provisions as well. The trust that maintains these properties and funded his research includes compensation for whoever ultimately brought his evidence to light. That's you, Jessica. Once the legal matters are settled, you'll have resources to rebuild your life wherever you choose." The concept seemed surreal after everything they'd experienced. "And the farmhouse? The one I actually paid for?" Still legally yours, Sarah confirmed, though I suspect you might prefer to sell it rather than live there given its history and associations. Jessica laughed softly. You think? The $800 farmhouse with the secret military bunker and people breaking in with guns? Not exactly the fixer-upper project I had in mind. The property has significant historical value now, Sarah pointed out. Once Silverthread is public knowledge, that land becomes the origin site of one of the most important government accountability cases in decades. You could probably sell it for considerably more than you paid. The practical consideration of real estate value seemed oddly normal amid their extraordinary circumstances. Jessica found herself wondering about all the mundane aspects of life that had been suspended during this crisis. Tyler's schooling, her freelance work, even the belongings they'd left behind at the farmhouse. I have no idea what happens next, she admitted. 2 days ago, my biggest concern was finding affordable housing and keeping my freelance clients happy. Now, I'm involved in exposing a decades-long government conspiracy. It's a lot to process. Sarah's expression softened with unexpected empathy. For what it's worth, you've handled it remarkably well. Most people would have fallen apart when confronted with what you've experienced. I had no choice. I have Tyler to protect. That's part of it, Sarah acknowledged. But don't underestimate yourself. You've shown exceptional judgment, courage, and adaptability. My father would have been impressed. The compliment touched Jessica more than she expected. Colonel Robert Garrison, a man she'd never met but whose planning and foresight had likely saved her and Tyler's lives, had created an extraordinary legacy. That she had somehow become part of that legacy still seemed unreal. Your father dedicated his life to this, Jessica observed. What will you do after it's over? Go back to your military career? Sarah's expression clouded. That's complicated. My role in exposing Silverthread will be revealed eventually. Some will view it as whistleblowing in the highest tradition of military service, defending the Constitution against domestic threats. Others will see it as betrayal of operational security. My career in military intelligence is likely over, regardless of the outcome. You knew that when you decided to help him. I did, Sarah confirmed without regret. Like my father, I took an oath to the Constitution, not to any particular program or chain of command. Silverthread violated that Constitution systematically. For decades, the career consequences were a price worth paying. A notification sound from one of the devices interrupted their conversation. Sarah checked it, her expression immediately sharpening. They've moved up the timeline, she announced. The first media outlet is going live with the story in 20 minutes, others to follow immediately after. They must have received intelligence about potential interference. Is that good or bad for us? Jessica asked. Good, Sarah said decisively. It means less time for Silverthread operators to continue pursuit before the disclosure changes their operational parameters. The sooner this goes public, the safer we are. She turned one of the tablets toward Jessica, showing a major news network's website. We can watch it happen in real time. For the next 15 minutes, they monitored the news site as it continued showing normal overnight content. Then precisely at the indicated time, the page refreshed with a breaking news banner, exclusive, decades-long illegal surveillance program exposed through whistleblower documents. The article that followed outlined the basic framework of Operation Silverthread, its origins, evolution, and constitutional violations, along with scanned images of several key documents from Colonel Garrison's collection. Within minutes, notification sounds came from other devices as additional news organizations published their own versions of the story, each with different supporting documents, but the same core revelations. It's done, Sarah said quietly. complex mixture of emotions in her voice. After 50 years of secrecy, Silver Thread is exposed. My father's work is complete. Jessica watched as the story rapidly gained traction. Social media reactions, commentary from legal experts, statements from surprised government officials. The machinery of public disclosure was functioning exactly as Colonel Garrison had intended, with too many simultaneous releases for any centralized effort to contain. Sarah's satellite phone rang. She answered, listening intently for several moments before responding with coded acknowledgements. When she ended the call, her expression confirmed what Jessica had hoped. All pursuit teams have been recalled, she reported. Silver Thread Command is in full crisis mode, ordering all field personnel to stand down immediately. The operative phrase was complete strategic reassessment, bureaucratic language for save yourselves. So we're safe? Jessica could hardly believe it could end so abruptly. From immediate threat, yes. There will be complications ahead, statements to authorities, possible testimony, media attention once your role becomes known. But the people with guns chasing us through the forest, they've been ordered to return to base immediately. The relief was so profound that Jessica felt suddenly lightheaded. The constant tension and vigilance of the past 36 hours, muscles she hadn't even realized were clenched, finally began to release. Tyler was safe, the documents were public, the immediate danger had passed. I should check on Tyler, she said, standing on slightly unsteady legs. Of course, Sarah agreed. We'll need to move again after dawn, somewhere more official where proper protective services can be arranged. But for now, get some rest. You've more than earned it. Jessica found Tyler still deeply asleep. Rex clutched tightly against his chest. In the soft nightlight glow, he looked so peaceful, so blessedly normal, just a sleeping child, not a witness to extraordinary events that would likely be discussed in history books someday. She settled into a chair beside his bed, unwilling to leave him, even now that the immediate danger had passed. As exhaustion claimed her, Jessica found herself reflecting on the strange chain of events that had led them here. An $800 condemned farmhouse purchased out of financial desperation, a hidden safe containing classified documents that spanned decades, a secret network of individuals who had worked for years to expose constitutional violations at the highest levels of government. And somehow, through sheer coincidence, or perhaps something more purposeful, as the Colonel might have believed, Jessica and Tyler had become the catalysts that finally brought it all to light. 4 hours later, Jessica awoke to morning sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, she was disoriented, the events of the previous day seeming like an impossible dream. Then Tyler stirred, opening his eyes and immediately asking, "Are the bad guys gone, Mom?" "Yes, buddy," she assured him, the reality of their situation returning fully. "The bad guys are gone. We're safe now." In the kitchen, they found Sarah preparing a simple breakfast, several tablets, and a television, all displaying news coverage of the Silver Thread revelation. The story had exploded overnight, dominating every major news outlet. Congressional leaders were issuing statements. The Pentagon had announced an immediate internal investigation, and the Justice Department had appointed a special counsel to examine potential criminal violations. "It's even bigger than we anticipated," Sarah reported, setting plates of eggs and toast before them. 3 former high-ranking officials have already released statements denying involvement. The president has scheduled an address to the nation for noon. Jessica watched the coverage with a surreal sense of detachment. The events being discussed with such gravity on national television were the same ones she and Tyler had experienced firsthand, yet seeing them transformed into breaking news made them seem simultaneously more significant and less personal. "What happens today?" she asked, helping Tyler cut his toast into manageable pieces. "Official protective custody," Sarah replied. I've arranged for FBI agents, ones I personally trust, to meet us at a secure location in Missoula. They'll take formal statements and establish appropriate protection while the case develops. Will they separate us? Jessica's primary concern remained Tyler's well-being. No, Sarah assured her. I've made that a non-negotiable condition of your cooperation. You and Tyler stay together throughout this process, with full accommodation for his needs. As they finished breakfast, Sarah received another call on her satellite phone. This conversation was longer, with Sarah providing detailed information about their location and status. When she ended the call, she turned to Jessica with an expression that mingled satisfaction and weariness. The FBI protective team will meet us in 2 hours, she reported. They're bringing formal documentation of witness protection protocols, immunity agreements, and preliminary statements for review. Everything by the book, completely transparent. Is this really ending? Jessica asked, still unable to fully believe the immediate danger had passed. This phase is ending, Sarah clarified. What follows will be complex, but conducted through legitimate legal channels, investigations, testimony, probably congressional hearings eventually. But the days of hiding in safe houses and fleeing through forests at night? Yes, those are over. Tyler, who had been unusually quiet during breakfast, finally spoke up. Do we have to talk about the secret room and the tunnel and the Colonel's special hiding places? Sarah knelt to his level, something she'd done previously when addressing him directly. Only to the right people, Tyler. The good guys who will make sure what happened to you and your mom doesn't happen to anyone else. And you'll always have your mom right beside you when you talk about it. He considered this seriously. Will I be on TV? Billy at my old school was on the news when his dad saved someone, and all the kids treated him different after. The question revealed a concern more age-appropriate than anything related to classified documents or government surveillance. A child worried about peer acceptance and normalcy. No, Tyler, Jessica assured him. Your name and face will be protected. No TV, no newspapers. The people who need to know will know, but not the whole world. This seemed to satisfy him, and he returned to his breakfast with renewed appetite. Jessica marveled again at his resilience, his ability to process extraordinary events through the lens of ordinary childhood concerns. Over the next 2 hours, they prepared for the transition to official protective custody. Sarah provided clean clothing from the house's supplies, helped them gather the few possessions they had managed to bring in their hasty escape, and briefed Jessica on what to expect from the FBI protective team. They'll initially take you to a secure location, probably a designated safe house in Missoula, she explained. From there, options will be discussed for longer-term arrangements while the investigation progresses. You'll have legal representation present for all discussions about testimony or statements. And you? Jessica asked. What happens to you after we're transferred to FBI custody? I have my own procedures to follow, Sarah replied. As a military intelligence officer involved in exposing classified operations, my situation is complicated. I'll be facing my own debriefings and likely disciplinary proceedings, but I've prepared for that eventuality for years. Jessica felt a surprising reluctance to part ways with this woman who had helped ensure their survival. Despite the brevity of their acquaintance, they had shared experiences few others could comprehend. Will we see you again? She asked. Eventually, Sarah confirmed. Once the initial investigations stabilize, we'll all be part of the same case. Our paths will cross again, though in more formal settings. Before Jessica could respond, a notification sound came from one of the tablets. Sarah checked it, her expression shifting to one of grim satisfaction. First arrests being made, she reported. 3 senior Silver Thread administrators taken. into custody by FBI agents, with more warrants being executed hourly. The system is responding exactly as my father predicted. Once exposed to light, the program couldn't withstand scrutiny. The news should have been purely satisfying, yet Jessica felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief certainly, but also a strange sense of anticlimax. After the intensity of their ordeal, watching justice unfold through news alerts and formal, legal processes seemed almost mundane. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "The aftermath, I mean. After the danger and adventure, does it always feel so procedural?" Sarah smiled with unexpected warmth. "Always. My father used to say, that's how you know you're back in the legitimate world, when the paperwork becomes more daunting than the pursuit." As they prepared for the final journey to meet the FBI protective team, Jessica took a moment to help Tyler organize his backpack, making sure Rex the dinosaur was securely tucked inside, alongside the few personal items they had managed to keep with them. "Mom," Tyler said quietly, "the farmhouse we bought, are we going to live there after all this is done?" The question caught Jessica by surprise. She hadn't given much thought to their long-term future, focused as she'd been on immediate survival. "I don't think so, buddy," she replied honestly. "That house has too many complicated memories now, but we'll find somewhere else, somewhere better." "With no secret tunnels?" he asked, half disappointed. Jessica laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuine lightness. "No secret tunnels, just a normal house where we can have a normal life. But we'll remember, right, about the Colonel and Sarah and Earl and the important papers? We won't pretend it didn't happen." "We'll remember," Jessica promised. "Some stories aren't meant to be forgotten, even after they end." And as they prepared to leave the safe house for their final transfer to official protection, Jessica reflected that this was indeed their story now, an extraordinary chapter in otherwise ordinary lives. What had begun as a desperate financial decision, buying a condemned farmhouse for $800, had transformed them into witnesses to history, participants in exposing a decades-long constitutional violation that would reshape government oversight for generations. Not the future she had envisioned when signing those purchase papers, certainly, but as Sarah had observed, sometimes the most significant journeys begin with the most mundane decisions. And as they stepped outside into the Montana morning, the weight of government secrets finally lifted from their shoulders. Jessica was already looking forward to whatever ordinary miracles awaited in the chapters yet to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.